Welcome, everyone. This is Web Accessibility, What, Why, and When. If that's not where you thought you were, please sit down and learn something. I'm Phil Kragnes. I manage the Computer Accommodations program here at the university. And accessibility is my life, kind of, both for myself personally and as part of my job. It's working with various entities across the U, from web designers and developers right on up the organizational chart. Today I'm going to be talking about, quote, web accessibility. And people hear this term accessibility, they're like, what does that really mean? So let me pull up, it helps access, helps if I turn the power on the keyboard.
Defining accessible. What accessible means a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally effective and equally integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use and time to completion.
So equivalent. That's kind of the key idea, is that when a person with a disability, whether it's a website, whether it's an ATM, whether it's whatever, their VCR, they should be able to operate that independently. They should be able to activate and interact with it as easily or nearly as easily as any other user. They should be able to access or complete a task in about the same time frame and with about the same amount of effort. What we often find with the web is we'll get either controls that are not keyboard operable, we'll get controls that are not labeled well, so a lot of time is spent searching rather than actually performing the task. Now, one idea that I've run across with a number of groups I've collaborated with is, we'll work on making it accessible, but in the meantime, we'll give people a phone number and they can call to get this done. And I kind of sit there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I get to 10, and then I calmly say, there's this thing about equivalent access. If you're talking about a course registration system and all other students can get on there 24/7 and register for the course they want, but this person with a visual impairment or motor impairment, whatnot, has to wait till Monday only to find out that course, that one course they need to graduate, is already full because they couldn't do it online. That's a bad situation, not only for the individual, but for the entity, whether it's an institution of higher learning or a company, a business. What if you go to your HR site and you go to sign up for benefits or do whatever, and you can't do it, you have to wait till the next day? Well, as long as you're not waiting till the last minute of open enrollment to sign up, then it may not be as big a problem. But there are times where time limitations, deadlines, etc. can be missed. And so it raises a really, it's just a horrible experience for everyone. And we'll get into more of why it can be a horrible experience. Now, a lot of people, they look here at the university, they'll say, oh, well, there's the Disability Resource Center. If there's a problem, they'll take care of it. And so I want to make the point, I'll move here to the next slide. I'll let my buddy Jaws here read us the content.
Bullet accessibility vs. accommodation. Bullet accessibility and usability. Bullet equivalent ease of use. Bullet equivalent time to completion.
Okay, so I've already talked about equivalent ease of use and time. So this idea of accessibility versus accommodation. So for me, in order to access this information on screen or information on a website, I need a piece of adaptive technology. In this case, the JAWS screen reader. That is an accommodation. But when I go to a website, that website should be designed and developed in a way to be accessible so that my needed accommodation will allow me to then access an accessible site, an accessible application. So it's that knowing that when I arrive somewhere, whether it be virtually or in the physical environment, that features and design elements have been put in place that allow a person with a disability or with a different learning style. You think about the thousands, tens of thousands of students at this university, thousands of employees, and we're not all visual learners, we're not all auditory learners, we're not all hands-on learners, we're all, so being able to provide these flexibilities in design that say, hey, you're coming to this, you want to access and interact with information in the way that works best for you. So you can think of it as accessing based on ability, preference, equipment being used. We often say equipment being used. Oh, you mean a handheld or a laptop or desktop, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, and a screen reader and a screen magnifier, and it's just equipment. We use a computer to access the web, and we use these other technologies to access the web indirectly. We're accessing the intermediate technology. But the environment needs to be flexible. Information needs to be conveyed to these adaptive technologies so that they can in turn convey it to the user. And there's many ways to do that. You can do it through well-designed HTML. There's also what's known as ARIA. And don't worry, it's not opera, and I'm not going to sing. I don't need money that bad. I always tell my wife, if we need money, I can always go downtown Minneapolis and sing for money. And she's like, well, honey, you're really not that good. And I said, yeah, I know. People pay me to stop. So, but ARIA, accessible, rich, I can say the word, accessible, rich Internet Application Suite. It became a W3C standard in March of 2014. And ARIA is a way to put some extra code into your website so that information is conveyed to a user who can't see. It's primarily geared towards screen reader users. Now, of course, when we talk about disabilities and people accessing the web, we're talking about people who can't hear, so the need for captioning and transcripts. We're talking about people with motor impairment that may not be able to control a pointing device accurately. Talking about people with low vision who might magnify the screen, and so all of a sudden you've got this information that pops up somewhere else on the screen, and they've got it blown up so much they're only really truly seeing maybe a quarter of the screen, and the little pop-up message is outside that area. So there's lots of ways that barriers can be presented, and again, ARIA looks at screen reader, but looking at design. How am I going to make this accessible? Well, accessibility, we've kind of gotten a feel, I hope, for what accessibility is, the what. Now let's talk about the why.
Slide 4. Why? Bullet benefits for users with disabilities. Bullet benefits for all users. Bullet benefits for site developers. Bullet right good sites BS. Great sites. Bullet avoiding the stick left parent legal and policy considerations right parent.
Okay, so who are we doing this? Maybe this could be the who and why section. Of course, I've already given you examples of people with disabilities who require that access be built in, that the site be designed and laid out and coded in a way that will allow them and or their adaptive technologies to interact with the site. But often when we think about accessibility, good layout, good design, good coding, we're talking about things that benefit all users. I mean, if you have a nice, clean, easy to understand site, easy to use, you know, what if you need to do something? Let's say you're at a kiosk and being a public kiosk, someone's done something really unpleasant with the mouse. And so all you've got left to you is keyboard navigation. You know, it's a good thing if that site has been designed with accessibility in mind and allows for keyboard navigation. Or let's say you're in a company that's so security conscious and paranoid that they prevent JavaScript from loading. So what's the fallback? That great idea of graceful fallback, graceful design. That benefits all users. So let's see here.
Avoiding the bullet benefits for site developers.
So benefits to site developers. I mean, you know, I often get into this conversation, especially with faculty who are producing documents, and they want to simply put in a heading for section heading, and wow, there's that format menu right there. I'm going to make the font bigger, and I'm going to bold it, and maybe I'll make it a little different color, or change the font family, something like that. That happens on the web too. You know, we're like, oh, this section needs heading, we'll throw it in, we'll class it heading, and we'll give it a bunch of styling. Well, there's no structural information for the screen reader to get a hold of. So it not only doesn't know each heading is exactly that, a heading, but there's no way to get an idea of how many headings there are, how the headings relate to one another, what the hierarchy is. And so by putting heading tags in, or in the case of Word and PDF, using styles to create headings rather than simply formatting, we put information in that the screen reader or other type of adaptive technology can get a hold of. But guess what? You want to go in and make your level 2 headings look a little different? Maybe you want, maybe they're a little too big. You want to make them a little smaller. Maybe you said, it's not really the font family I want, or maybe whatever. You know, if you've only done formatting, and at least in a Word document, you're going to have to go through and find every heading and manually change it. If a few years ago, without CSS, you would have had to have done the same thing: is go through your document, your website, find every heading, manually change it, and all this. Remember those bad old days of inline formatting? So now it's like, oh, I want it a little bigger. I go to my style sheet, and a little bigger, a little smaller, boom, change. It's done throughout the site. Wow, that saved a lot of time than sitting there hunting through this, that, and the other thing, and dozens of pages, and so on. So it can make coding much quicker, and as I hinted at a few minutes ago, it's good design. So you've got nice, clean, semantically meaningful, well-formatted, well-laid out code that's much faster to review, to go through, to edit, modify, insert, whatever. So it's a big time savings for developers, or again, in the case of documents, whoever's creating that document, being able to change all the headings at once and not have to do that search. Because we all know what happens when you have to search one by one. Human error. It's like, oh, got them all except that one. Of course, that's the one everyone's going to notice. That looks really strange. He didn't do a very good job at editing his document. So, can save some embarrassment too. And
good sites BS, great sites.
so that gets on to this point: good sites and great sites. So, as developers, content creators, whatever the case may be, you put out stuff that I hope you're proud of. It's like, I did a really nice job. This looks nice. Well, what if that screen reader user comes along and it just so happens they've got this rich uncle who's an alumnus to the university, and that person can't interact with the page or can't acquire the information because it isn't laid out or coded in a way to be accessible to the screen reader, and they start bitching to their uncle. I tried to do this the other day on this site and I couldn't do it, or I missed out on this activity, or, well, what's the uncle going to do? He's this alumnus who's making large contributions to the university each year. And so he figures, hey, I'm giving them money, they're going to listen to me. And all of a sudden, what you created and are proud of, somebody out there, maybe a small portion of the population, but somebody is bitching and moaning about something you've created. That doesn't feel so good. It's bad for the individual developer, it's bad for the department in which they work, and it's bad for the university in general. Same with a company. Who am I going to do business with? Two companies sell a very similar product. One has a beautifully accessible website, and the other I can barely get any information out of it. Well, I know which company I'm going to do business with. So it's not only pride in your product, it's kind of earning that customer loyalty. I did work in the corporate world once, so I know those kind of buzz terms. We have to earn customer loyalty, make them return, make them want to buy our products, that make them want to come to our university. Diversity is a big thing here at the University of Minnesota. What happens when a student decides they want to go into a specific field, and they happen to be blind or low vision or deaf or whatever, let's say deaf, and they get to a department's website and all the information about the department, lots of great information, but it's all video clips with no captioning. Well, we can kiss that potential student. Adios. They're going to look for a student or an institution that will support their needs. I mean, it doesn't matter how good a law school you have or whatever the department they want to go into, doesn't matter what kind of reputation it has. If they can't get the information and it is not a welcoming environment in which they're trying to get that information, they're probably going to go elsewhere. So whether it's an education, whether it's a product, etc., it's very important to maintain and present good image. So you can be as, that pride doesn't run the risk of being tarnished, whether it's your pride as a developer, a content creator, maintainer, a department, or a university. So then that brings us to the ugly part. Those are the carrots.
Avoiding the stick, left, fair, and legal.
And stick. We always hear about these lawsuits. There are a lot of lawsuits around this country against institutions of higher learning in particular, where students have had the kinds of trouble I started the session with. They weren't able to register for a course timely, in a timely manner, or independently. They can't do their coursework. The LMS that's being used or the way the course website is laid out and designed, they can't do the work independently and in a timely fashion. And so they turn to an attorney. Well, what they'll do first is they'll go to the department, well, you need to fix this. And they're like, yeah, it's on our schedule for 2030. Then they go probably to the Disability Services Office or Disability Resource Center, as we're known here at the U. And, they might be provided with an accommodation because the accessibility is not there. So they give them a reader. Well, now that person has to arrange their schedule around somebody else's schedule, and that can be a whole mess. So finally they get frustrated and they go to the Office of Civil Rights. And the Office of Civil Rights launches an investigation. And yet, if you've never been involved in one of these, believe me, from what I've heard, what I've seen, you don't want to be. Talk about a load on productivity. Come in, they want to know what plans you've made, your intentions, your schedule for incorporating accessibility, and if they don't like what they see, they're going to get a judge to tell you, no, you will incorporate accessibility by doing these things on this timeline. So they take the control completely away, not to mention all just the interruption and work, having to come up with all this documentation and other stuff. So, create an accessible site, reduce complaints to the rich uncle, reduce complaints to the Office of Civil Rights, and create a site that people with disabilities are going to go, wow, I was thinking about going to the University of Minnesota, and I visited this site for this department. I'm really interested in the field of X, and it was great. I could get around the site. It was easy to understand. It was all keyboard navigable. That's not a good word. Navigable. And my screen reader read me all the information. This is the place I want to go. They care about accessibility, and so I know I'm not going to have a real hard time at least getting the basic information and complete my coursework. So there's always a question now, which laws do we have to abide by? I once heard the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, that has no web standards in it. It always I kind of have to smile when I hear, can you help us make our website ADA compliant? I want to say, no, I can't, because there's no standards for web in there. But it does say that a person with a disability shall have equal access to all the goods, services, programs, blah, 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 that are being offered to the non-disabled. Well, if the website is the means of offering that, whether it's a hybrid course, an online course, signing up for classes, whatever the case, that means your website needs to be accessible. It doesn't tell you, well, you have to do this and that. Here at the university, we have the Accessibility of Information Technology policy, was enacted in 2001, and under that, the university is to abide by and follow the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 level AA. AAA is next to impossible to achieve, and single A, you might as well not bother. So those are the standards, those are the how-tos, and I could do a whole half-day presentation on what those standards are about. But WebCAG 2.0 AA is a standard we've adopted. It's an international standard. But a lot of people come up and they're like, should we be following Section 508? Well, if we actually knew what Section 508 was, it might not be too bad, but they've been talking about revising it. It's under revisement. It's been going on for 4 or 5 years now. Last week, they did come out and say that it will be ready it will become an enacted statute in 2018. All right. We've only got 2 more years to wait I don't know why the government can't just adopt WCAG. It's the international standard, but you know. So Section 508, if you are working under federal or state contract, you are bound by Section 508. My advice is forget about Section 508. Comply with WCAG 20AA. By doing that, you've not only met the Section 508 standards, you've actually done something that 508 doesn't. You've made your site accessible. But 508, again, any federal, state grants, monies, you would be required to follow any Section 508 guidelines that an agency should provide. That's not to say the agencies themselves follow it, but so the basic CYA is WCAG, if that's okay. All right, so we know the why we should do this: personal, institutional, departmental pride, avoiding or inoculating ourselves against potential complaints and or litigation, that we are benefiting all users. You know, again, you walk into some of these large lecture rooms or something, you're sitting in the back, and maybe you can't, you know, the audio is distorted, the echo's so bad, but you can read the captioning on the screen. Or let's say you're in the library and you're wanting to show a promotional clip on your website, and you know the librarian's looking at you with this large yardstick in her hand, like, yeah, go ahead, turn those speakers on, make my day. But if you've got captioning, you don't need those speakers. People can still get the content. So again, benefits everyone. Let me see where I'm sitting in time.
2:45 p.m.
Okay, good. So we got about half an hour.
Slide 5. Web, bullet legacy pages, bullet planning, build-NVS, Tacked-on, testing and evaluation.
Okay, so when should we engage in accessibility? Well, obviously, if you've got a legacy page or legacy pages, sites, the planning stage, you're already beyond. So can you go back and fix those sites? And people, these responses usually, we've got an awful lot of pages. You know, I've talked to groups too who have put out documents in PDF format, and they're just scanned images, image-only files that aren't accessible to a screen reader. They're also, you know, you can't, the average user can't do a search for information. It's an image. And they're like, you know, we have hundreds of PDFs. I hear this from human resources all the time. We've got, and it's like, well, yeah, no one expects you to invent a magic wand and fix all these things overnight or even in the next year. But we have these things called web stats. What pages do people frequent most often? What documents do they look at? What are they doing on your site? And so you take the top, you know, however many you can handle in a given period, and you start working on the most used ones and keep on there. So let's say someone does, but they happen to hit that one page or that one site or whatever that isn't fully accessible, and they go to the Office of Civil Rights and that site isn't accessible, I can't, you know, give their sob story. And OCR comes to you and you say, here's our plan. We're going to cover these pages in this by this deadline. We're going to cover these pages by this next deadline. And OCR is going to say, you've got a plan, you're in the clear. So that's something that, you know, people are worried, oh my God, OCR complaints and lawsuits and all this. we just can't get it done. We don't have the staff. We've got too many projects going on. The resources aren't there. Well, got to get that into your plan. Even if you only do a few, maybe 2-3 pages a week, but you get that in process, then you're pretty much covered. Where lawsuits and other complaints of a litigious nature are under consideration. Now, as far as developing new pages, new content, accessibility needs to be there from the beginning. It's not we're going to design this site and then we're going to tack accessibility on at the end. That, doesn't work very well. It's doable in some cases, depending on the complexity of the page. But what you'll find is that if you bring accessibility in from the get-go, it'll make you start asking questions about, is this really the best way to do it, or is this really the most usable way for all users? Start thinking about that clean coding, what widgets you're going to throw in there, how you're going to code those. Is it more for, it's cool, so I'm going to throw it in there because it's cool, rather than this really improves the user experience. And that's what we need to think about. Accessibility and usability, or user experience, are just tied together. They're not one and the same. You can have usability without accessibility, although it's much harder to have accessibility without usability. But get that into the plans. How am I going to lay it out? How am I going to lay out my underlying HTML code, and what type of styling? What kind of other features am I going to do through JavaScript or CSS, and what is my site going to do if the person has JavaScript disabled, things of that nature. It makes, you'll find it'll be much smoother, and you know what usually happens to us, I don't know too many people that haven't had this experience. You get down to the deadline for a project, and what happens? Time gets compressed. It's like, oh my God, there's only a week left, and I've got umpteen million things to do to get this ready for launch. And accessibility gets pushed to that, well, we've got to get it live, and then we'll go back and get the accessibility in there, test for it. Yeah, well, between going live and testing for it is a dangerous place to be, because that's, of course, when someone's going to need that site or whatever, and it's not going to work, and the complaint process that I've already talked about is going to begin. So getting it in there. Well, part of accessibility, of course, is testing for accessibility. There are a lot of tools out there that can be used for testing accessibility. And those tools can range from online, stick a URL in and test it, to plugins for browsers, number of good plugins for Firefox. We have a service that we subscribe to here at the university called Compliance Sheriff, and if you're here at the university, want a Compliance Sheriff account. If you visit the Computer Accommodations Program website, it's just CAP, Computer Accommodation Program, in other words, cap.umn.edu, and there you'll find requesting an account for Compliance Sheriff. Now, this is a tool that can actually crawl your site. So So you can test as many levels deep and then get this ungodly report and go, oh my. But just like fixing legacy pages, prioritize. You're not going to get this, let's say you get a report with 23 errors. Well, maybe you fix, 2 a month. You're making some progress there. Now, the thing to keep in mind with tools is they check web elements and widgets. So they're like, yep, this was coded properly for accessibility. Well, coding is a large part of the battle, but if a user gets there and each component is accessible, but the overall process is just way beyond understanding. Someone's like, man, I need this form to register for classes, but this form requires that I already have my PhD. It's like, so you need to try to test the process. And that can be getting a hold of a screen reader and learning a little bit about it, testing the site yourself. It can be recruiting people who have disabilities, either maybe students at the U. Oftentimes students with disabilities have some difficulty finding work-study jobs. Driving the paratransit van isn't something you'd want me doing as a student. People would never get anywhere in time. I mean, nobody would get anywhere on time. They'd all be driving by with, oh look, the blind guy just ran into Walter Library again. So, put out an ad. Maybe it's only for a semester, but provide this work-study job. Student comes in who's a screen reader user, or maybe a screen magnification, speech recognition user. Maybe you want to hire all 3, whatever, and have them run through your site. Can you complete the task? Remember that definition early when I began? They need to be able to complete it in equivalent manner and with equivalent ease of use and in a reasonable time to completion. That's something a tool cannot check for. So I encourage you to either think about that route. There are organizations for different disabilities that you might look for volunteers, things of that nature. I mean, there's no reason someone who is confined to their own home can't test your web page remotely. So there are lots of avenues there, but just remember that tools alone, they'll get you a large part of the way there, but they're not going to get you the whole way. Okay, well,
2:57 p.m.
So I've got about 18 minutes left, and what I want to do is answer any of your questions. If there aren't a lot of questions, I can show you how easy it is to add accessibility to a simple HTML example. Whatever you all, this is your time to stick it to me.
I'd love to hear more about the last topic that you were just talking about, this idea of, we've been using accessibility tools, the wave tools and stuff to test our sites for years. And they passed, but what I'm concerned about is not just the accessibility, but the user experience. I want people who come to our site to have an enjoyable experience, not a frustrating one. And I know that things like, making sure that navigation links are clear, people don't get too cutesy with titles and stuff like that. Do you have any other suggestions for, not just code correctness, but a site that is more accessible and a friendly and welcoming way?
Yeah. You know, I think an underutilized resource here at the university, especially in the development process of sites, is, I mean, we often refer to it as the Usability Lab. They are changing their name to User Experience Lab. Now, I used to train their staff in identifying accessibility issues, and although that component's gotten, I mean, their schedule workload has gotten to the point where that's, you know, if they recognize an outstanding problem, they'll refer someone to me or my teammate. But I would talk with David Rosen or Nick Rosenkrantz in the Usability Lab and say, is it possible to recruit users with disabilities, students, grad students, faculty, and staff who could serve as, so, you know, you go into a testing environment. I just spent Tuesday and Wednesday this week in the User Experience Lab looking at a new accessibility site we're designing. And we had a set of instructors, a set of instructional designers, and a set of web developers to run through the site and give us their feedback. Well, there's no reason there couldn't be a group of individuals with disabilities and get that feedback. As I said, there are organizations like Vision Loss Resources, Blind Incorporated, several for people with physical, United Cerebral Palsy, places like that people could either get volunteers or, rather than paying a work study salary, you get volunteers for a $25 Target gift card. So there are everything from potentially free volunteers to fairly low cost to get that experience component. There's some basic things developers can do themselves, like just try navigating the site with keyboard only, put the mouse away. Can I do everything on this site as quickly and easily as I can with the mouse? So that's a possibility. As I said, there's a screen reader called Nvda, non-visual desktop access. It used to be thought of as the poor person's screen reader. It's free, but it has gotten so powerful, and it's still free. If you go to NV Access, I don't remember now if it's .com or .org, but you can get a copy there, and there are actually guides for learning how to use it and how to assess a website using NVDA. So free tool, lots of documentation out there on how best to use it for assessment purposes. So those are kind of, from User Experience Lab here on campus to learning some of the free adaptive technologies, to looking for volunteers or work study students. There's 4 options there for kind of the accessibility user experience aspect.
I actually have recruited. I have 2 people with visual impairments, 2 with kind of physical limitations. One lady uses a mouth device, another one uses a blower or a puffer. And then I have about half my family is deaf, so I have lots of folks to help me with that. And I've got so I've got this group of people to do things, and but we're still kind of having a hard time coming up with sort of standards for things like lengths of paragraphs and it's much more content that I'm actually asking about is, you know, what kinds of things are annoying and difficult for people to, in your experience, to kind of consume as they're going through a site. Not necessarily the accessibility, but the content itself.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of studies and things of, you know, we should often put in terms of grade level, although that's really not accurate nomenclature. But, you know, keeping readability, reading simple, not getting fancy with big words. I mean, you know, people think, oh, you're dumbing down the page. It's like, no, really intelligent, extremely intelligent people prefer information that they can consume quickly and easily. So, you know, thinking about areas of psychology where we want to chunk information, making sure that we don't provide a wall of text, that we break things up into bullet points and give some of that break from straight prose. They're kind of common writing things. You can then get into things like there are certain fonts that people with dyslexia can read more easily than other fonts. You know, we always say stay away from serif fonts for sure, and go sans serif. Because serif fonts, believe me, you know, you take a screen magnifier and you blow text up, you know, 6 or 8 times its normal size, and all you see are these little curly cues hanging off the ends of letters. People are like, what the heck is that letter? I have no idea. Scanning optical character recognition systems have the same problem with serif fonts. So keeping the fonts clean and simple. You know, as I said, breaking things up with bullet points, using headings appropriately, so that it not only breaks things into sections, but that those sections have the heading levels you use convey a hierarchy. They allow the user to understand what refers, what information is related to other information and things of that nature. I can never remember their new name, but the Center for Teaching and Learning, I think probably would be a good resource for the actual content and how to most clearly, you know, the other advantage of writing clearly and using bullet points is that the recall of that information is much easier and persists for a much longer time, which is what we all hope when we create a website, that, you know, the information we're providing people will actually stick with them. So yeah, I would check out something like the Center for, I wish I could remember their new name. Everyone keeps changing their name, and of course I started here at the U 18 years ago, so all my acronyms are 18 years out of date.
Thanks for your interest.
Do you have some suggestions for dealing with line graphs and bubble charts and other kind of data-dense visual information?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways that you can handle that. Now, if it's possible to put the description or the data set or something into the body of text, so you put up this graphic, and you don't want to put all this numerical information into the alternative text for the image. There's lots of problems with that. First of all, you're limited to 256 characters. Second of all, every time the alt text wraps, it will repeat image, the word image, before each line. It gets very confusing. There's some talk about deprecating the long desk element. In HTML, at least in 4.01, there's an attribute called long desc, LONGDESC, short for long description. And you put that in an image and put a URL. So it's long desk equals and in quotes whatever the URL is. And that URL points to a page with data set, description, whatever. The only people that can access that long desk link are screen reader users or people who have the Juicy Studio Firefox long desk plugin. Otherwise, it's completely invisible. It looks like an image, and yet screen readers can't. It'll say, you'll have your alternatives text saying, graph showing whatever, click here for long description. And the screen reader hits enter, page opens up, boom, they've got the long description. Now if the description, as I said, is such that it's actually part of the body content, then all you have to do is label the image, chart showing whatever, and then in the following paragraphs, you describe that. So those are two methods that can be used. Of course, you can always turn the image into a link that's available to all users. And for some people, that can be helpful. If it shows a data set, if someone's doing research in your area or something, they not only want to see this summary graph, they want to see the data set. And sure, they can click on the little email link and write a request, but if they can click on a link and it takes them to a page and they see this table with the data points right there, or a further text explanation. Again, we're talking about things that can benefit not only users with disabilities, but all visitors or users of a site. Those are the most common means of conveying complex tables, graphs, and charts.
What about data that auto-updates?
Auto-updating data, so you have is it in graphical format or is it an actual data table?
Well, I have both that I have to deal with, actually.
Oh, okay.
Well, I have line charts that auto-update, every 10 seconds you put a new data point on it, and then I have other things where it's text that updates periodically when things change, like events happen, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, text that's generated automatically through a scripting process. So like a lot of sites you visit and it has today's date and the current time. So it's putting up dynamic content. Generally, as long as the end result is text content, then it's not an issue. Scripts that refresh the entire page, on the other hand, that's going to cause a screen reader to jump to the top of the page every time it refreshes. So as long as the content is text and it's being written dynamically without a page refresh, then there shouldn't be any issue. Now, if you, let's say, I'll take a very simple example. So let's say we have some type of little widget that's showing let's say temperatures throughout the day, and so that number is going to keep dynamically changing. There is ARIA markup that will cause that information to be read aloud each time it updates. In that case, you'd want to look, Google ARIA, ARIA -atomic, ATOMIC, along with ARIA-live, and that's the intent of that ARIA markup, is to watch for dynamic content that's changing and report it when the change occurs. Now, if you've got a data point, or multiple data points every few seconds or minutes, the person's not ever going to get anything done on that page. But if it's in cell content, they can go to that cell and monitor it if that's what they're interested in. So avoiding page refresh is really the principal thing to keep in mind, because that will cause the screen reader to reload the DOM and start from the top of the page. So any other, let's see, we got started a minute late, but you probably have
3:13 p.m.
So, what are people's primary responsibility? Are there developers, content providers? What areas? Or it sounds like we've got at least a couple of content or a couple of developers.
I own a company that has 11 staff, 3 developers that are doing programming, a couple of user interface folks. We've been doing accessible websites, at least to the best of our ability. Some of them are more or less accessible when we first started, since around 2006, 10 years.
Oh, making that start, making that plan.
We've been trying, yeah. About half my family is deaf, and so it's been something that's near and dear. It's really interesting. It's made our sites better, and I can definitely attest to that. Just making them accessible makes the sites smoother. I use the analogy of doorknobs. Folks that have never thought about it before, that doorknobs work better when they're accessible.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing things we take for granted. You've got levered doorknobs that, wow, you can actually shut with your arms full. We've got curb cuts that, you're pulling a computer bag, riding a bike, pushing a baby stroller, whatever the case. Automatic door opener, same as levered door handles. Hit a button with the elbow when your hands are full. We get auditory feedback and instructions. Not that modern cars even have to put the key in the ignition, but in the old days, you opened the door and your keys were still in the car. There was this ding, 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 or for a while there in the 80s, it would actually tell you you've left your keys in the ignition. Your door is ajar. No, it's not. It's a door. It's not a door. The military is, a lot of adaptive technology and things, evolve from military technology. I mean, when you're flying at Mach 1 or Mach 2, and you're tracking an enemy, you can't look at every gauge, and so when there's an emergency, you don't want that information conveyed visually. You want the plane to tell you, this is happening. And same with controlling different things. You only have so many fingers and arms and all that. And speech recognition really it began as a DARPA defense contract project to create speech recognition. And now, I mean, when I started working in the field of adaptive technology, back in the mid-90s, we had discrete speech recognition. So you dictated to your compute. And now we have systems where you just talk to it like this, and it writes down everything you're saying, and to the point where we've gotten it in our handheld devices. If you don't realize it, Apple has really gone a long way building accessibility into their phones. So Android's got a little ways to catch up. Android, you can get a screen reader, you can download it, but you have to have sighted assistance to go to the Google Play Store and download it. Apple devices, it's built in. Anyone here got a Mac in front of them right now?
Mm-hmm.
Press Command F5.
restrictions of items on the screen and can be used to control the computer using only your keyboard. If you already know how to use voice.
So the screen reader is built in all Apple devices. Command F5 will turn that off. But it's right there. I could walk into any Apple store, walk up to any laptop, desktop, or handheld device and use it. You know, I okay, we're a few minutes. Let's make it more blank.
Two messages. What? One message. What?
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, here,
Vertical navigation. Words, characters, headings.
I turned.
Speak language. Vertical navigation. Language. Speech rate. 65%, 50%, 55%. Heading, handwriting. Lowercase, headings. Social networking folder, 9 apps. Dock, Safari. Safari, address, text.
But that was pretty interesting too. Like, yeah, you don't ever use the screen really. So
Yeah,
like,
so-
it saves the battery a lot because you don't use the screen.
Yeah, well, yeah, the screen curve one's pretty good.
And now it's showing the screen. But
Yep.
Logo, link, image, link.
yeah, you don't have to.
So here's, let's see if this, I can turn my rotor.
Handwriting, lowercase, headings.
Headings.
16 headings.
There are 16 headings on this page. Now I just flick down.
How to use, heading level 1. General, heading level 3. Wi-Fi calling FAQs, heading level 6, link.
They've blown their headings, 1 through 6.
Heading level 6. HD voice for Android FAQs, heading level 6, link. HD voice for iOS
Okay.
FAQs, handwriting, lower, words. Vertical navigation lines, landmarks. 0 landmarks,
So they didn't use landmarks, didn't use original landmarks.
links. 57 links.
57 links, that's pretty extreme.
Form controls. 6 form controls.
6 form controls,
Lists. 0 lists.
0 lists,
Tables. 0 tables. Images. 1 image.
1 image.
Image not found. Logo. Link. Image.
Logo link. So, logo of what, guys? You know, it's
What
like-
site are you on there? What site is that?
Verizon.
Man.
Lowercase. Text selection. Edit.
So,
Language. Speech rate.
but yeah, if you go into settings, general accessibility, you
Yeah, there's lots of options.
Yeah.
can, Zoom, voiceover. So, well, we're a little bit over, but I want to thank everyone for taking interest in accessibility, for putting up with me for an hour. And this last screen
Slide 6, contact, Bill.
has my email and phone number, so if you have a question about accessibility or whatever, please feel free to drop me a message.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.